Hi, I'm Kyle, a designer in the GitLab Secure team. Today I'm following up on one of our UX team initiatives called Experience Baseline and Recommendations. This is part 2, which is a recommendation to part 1 of our security dashboard audit. The video is linked in the description of that part 1. The experience we're focusing on is improving the following user task or job to be done, which is the following. When reviewing vulnerabilities for multiple projects, I want to see them all in one location so that I can prioritize my efforts to resolve or triage them while seeing the larger picture. Okay, let's walk through first the problems that we're focusing on that we are then making recommendations for. So the current screen that we're looking at is the security dashboard. The first problem that is visible is that the actual vulnerabilities that I want to see are not visible. So here we have a high-level summary and we have chart data, but the actual vulnerabilities are scrolled. The user has to scroll down here to check them out and to address them. And the screen that we're looking at is a 1440 by 900 pixel screen, which is a pretty common laptop display. So we want to figure out a way of surfacing those and making them visible. The next problem we're looking at is when the user adjusts the filter. So for example, changing this to high severity level, the summary view still displays 0 for the non-selected criticality levels. This may confuse the user as the data displaying 0 may be misinterpreted as valid data. In addition, it's not an ideal use of space because it's pushing the most relevant data, which is these high-level severity vulnerabilities in the chart. It's pushing them down the way a bit. Let me just unselect this. Another problem that we're focusing on is that it's unclear to the user what the time frame of the table vulnerabilities occurred that are being displayed. The graph here has a time selector, so you can see the vulnerabilities over time in the chart, but that does not control, the time selector does not control the table data here. And in fact, the actual data that's being showed here in the table are the results of the most recent security scan on the default branch, though this is not explicit to the user. So they wouldn't be aware of when these vulnerabilities were added or found to then be displayed here. All right, let's take a look at some of the recommendations. For this issue, it's pretty focused on the layout. So here in annotation 1, the layout changes are focused on prioritizing the table's vulnerabilities data. And we do this by, again, in annotation 1, the header. This could include the section headers, so that could be called vulnerabilities or vulnerability management, and the filters would be there. So the header gives them a good idea of what you can be doing on that page. Management is one idea because they're going to be managing and triaging vulnerabilities here. And then it's side by side with the filters that controls the data below it. Here in the main section in annotation 2, that's where the recommendation is saying, let's put the most important data there, front and center, which would be the actual vulnerabilities in the table data. This makes it immediately visible to the user when they land on the page. The third annotation is an aside, and this could contain the high-level summary data. So that is the severity level type and count, as well as the actual chart that showed vulnerabilities over time. The great thing about line charts and line graphs is that they scale really well. So whether you're on mobile or a super large screen, they scale really, really well. So they don't need to take up a lot of space. Having it in a smaller aside could still convey the data we want the user to have, which is vulnerabilities over time, while not pushing down the most important information, which is the actual vulnerabilities that they want to triage and address. So just translating this in visual design, just to get an idea of what this would look like. As I said, we have the header at the top, vulnerability management, and the relevant features that we have, or filters, excuse me, that we have today. And we have the actual vulnerabilities front and center. So they land here, and it's immediately clear to them. Excuse me, it's immediately clear to them and visible. Here in the aside, we see the chart that shows vulnerabilities over time, as well as the high-level summary, which also serves as a key to the chart. Now let's say that the user changed and filtered the severity level to, say, high or critical level. So in this case, the user changed it to critical. Here in the aside, it's only showing the relevant data, that is critical severity level vulnerabilities. This, opposed to the current way, just removes any confusion of the other data points that display 0, and this just surfaces what's relevant at the time, in this case, the user filtering down to just critical level. Just a few other thoughts for consideration is a confidence filter and a date range. This could give the user more control of the data that they want to manage, prioritize, and triage. An example of this is the user could come in, and if there's a lot of vulnerabilities and they're overwhelmed, they can use the filters to just surface critical level ones that are high confidence and that were in just the last day. So one use case there is maybe the user was out of the office yesterday and they just want to know what new ones are there. Surfacing new vulnerabilities will be a separate issue outside of this one, but just wanted to call out these two filters here. So anyway, that kind of wraps up the recommendations here. Really appreciate you checking out the video and would love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and ways that we could improve this. Thanks.